It's time for Wretched Radio with Todd Friel.
So, you got yourself a prodigal, do ya? This is Wretched Radio. I suspect nothing is more heartbreaking than a child who wanders away from the truth. Isn't that what John tells us? There's no greater joy than to see children walking in the truth. And when one of yours goes wayward, wow, is that heartbreaking. The question then becomes, how now do you treat that child? And some of the complexity of answering that question, I think, is wound up in what is the child doing? What lifestyle has the child chosen? Drugs, alcohol, the party lifestyle, hooking up, homosexuality. That happens more than I think most of us imagine. How does the parent treat that child? So, over the weekend, when I was just reading through stacks and stacks of stuff, in between fasting and praying, of course, and my 64 hours of daily private quiet time, was reading an old article. This goes back to 2007. Abraham Kuyper, the last name rings a bell. It's John's son, and if I'm not mistaken, Abraham Kuyper, he was a bit wayward himself. I think he's come back to the reservation, but he used to be, I think, a little bit wayward himself. And he wrote 12 ways to love your wayward child. If you don't think that this is going to apply to you because, well, I don't have a wayward child. Perhaps not yet. Perhaps they haven't gone through the season where they are trying to figure out things on their own for themselves. And even a child who doesn't go wayward outwardly can go wayward in their heart. The question is, how do we treat the child who is being belligerent, who is pushing you away, and who's pushing the church away? Your mileage may vary, but I think that some of this will apply to you also. Let's jump in, shall we? Rule number 1, if you got yourself a prodigal, and this is, you're going to go, oh, well, that's just such a Sunday school answer. Yeah, that doesn't mean it isn't true, though. And this is the one rule that will guide all of the other pieces of advice from Abraham Kuyper. This is the linchpin because this is the goal. What does it profit a mom or dad if their child is a 4.0, graduates with the Magna Carta Laude? Clearly, I wasn't one of those people. Who cares if they are the valedictorian, but they don't love Jesus? And that is why rule number 1 is point them to Christ. Point them to Christ. And when you're done pointing them to Jesus Christ, point them to Christ some more. Their danger that they are presently in is not sex, drugs, and rock and roll, not laziness, not crime, not cussing or covetousness or slovenliness. They're just lazy and won't get off the couch. Right, I know. That gets up your... I get that. They're just not being very productive. Right. So let's say that they become more industrious than Steve Jobs, but they die and go to hell. It doesn't mean that these issues aren't worth addressing. It doesn't mean that they have no significance, but isn't the big enchilada that they will die, go to heaven, and spend eternity with Jesus and you? So point them to Christ. That is their problem. Remember, our brains are busted because our believing is wonky. And this is so counterintuitive to the way the world thinks. You got to fix their thinking. Just get their thinking right, and then they'll believe right. Not according to the Bible. The Bible says faith comes first, and I can demonstrate that with a rather trite analogy. Aren't almost all of them exactly that? But if I told you, hey, I put $10 million into your bank account, what would you do? All right, let's role play, because we did this in rehearsal already. Joey, yes. I put $10 million into your bank account. What are you going to do?
No, you didn't. Really?
What are you going to do?
I'm going to go out and buy a yacht. Or two.
All right.
An island. I'm going to buy my own island like Phil Collins.
Somebody's been watching a little too much HGTV. All right. If you believe me, you'd react and you'd start going, fantasizing about all the things I'm going to do with all that cash. And your imagination would run wild. It would make you happy. And then I think it would also cause you to act. You'd probably skedaddle to that bank to withdraw the money to start using it. But what came first? You believe me. Or you don't believe me and you don't do nothing. It doesn't affect your emotions. Let's take the analogy a step further. So you believe me that I put $10 million into your bank account, all excited. You're imagining a yacht. You're going to live on an island with Phil Collins. I don't know how he got involved in this. Just another day in paradise for both of you. You get to the bank and you're informed. What? Not only do you not have $10 million in the bank, you're $50 million in debt. What happened? Well, I made you a promise. You imagined it. It gave you joy. You acted on the promise, and then I pulled the football out from underneath you, and you landed flat on your back, and now you're miserable and mad. And that's what the world does to us. It lies. It gives us a deceptive system. Believe this, do this, act on this. Don't worry, you'll be happy. And then you act on the promises that can't possibly deliver, and you land it flat on your back, and the world tells you, well, just try harder next time. That's because you were believing lies. When you believe the truth, then your thinking is affected. Then your emotions change. Then your actions go in a different direction. But believing must come first. And the same thing is true with your wayward child. They need faith first. All of the other issues will get cleaned up progressively once they believe right. Number 2, this won't shock you. For your wayward child, pray like a nobody's business. Number 3, acknowledge something is wrong. It's okay. Don't ignore it. Pretend it doesn't exist. Holidays might be easier, but your child's eternity won't. So keep your eyes focused on Christ. Now, I think we need to be mindful. That doesn't mean every opportunity you sneak it in. Hey, Mom, can I have more of that dressing? You know, you'll be dressed in robes of righteousness for all of eternity. You don't need to be constantly on it, but you do need to be mindful to keep your eye on the prize. Number 4, don't expect them to be Christ-like. They can't. A pagan can only act like a pagan. You might say, well, I know you're struggling with believing in Jesus, but can't you at least admit that getting wasted every day is a sin? Well, they can admit it. It's not going to change anything. Their unbelief is the most dangerous problem that they have. It's not the drinking, really. No matter how your child's unbelief manifests itself, always be sure to focus more on the heart sickness than its symptoms. Number 5. Here's one that might cause you a little consternation. I looked up that word before the program began. Number 5, welcome them home. What? From Abraham Kuyper. If your daughter smells like weed or an ashtray, spray her jacket with Febreze and change the sheets when she leaves, but let her come home. If you find out she's pregnant, buy her vitamins, take her to her 20-week ultrasound, protect her from Planned Parenthood, and by all means, let her come home. If your son is broke because he spent all the money you lent him on loose women and ritzy liquor, sound familiar? Let him come home. If he hasn't been around for a week and a half because he's been staying at his girlfriend or boyfriend's apartment, plead with him not to go back and let him come home. Yes, there are rules. They can't infect the younger kids. They can't be doing the sinful activities in your home. But if you don't let them come home when they're ready to come home, if God works on their hearts and changes them, they won't want to come home unless they know they're welcome at home. Number 6, plead with them more than you rebuke them. Carping doesn't usually get the job done. Number 7, connect them to believers who have better access to them. If you can, your child won't listen to you. Will the child maybe listen to somebody else they think is hipper, cooler, more relevant, whatever? Try to connect them to believers who can talk some sense into them. Try to RESPECT their friends. You say, but they're so bad for my son. Yeah, and your son is so bad for them. How's about them apples? So when your son, daughter shows up with a bad friend, look, there's somebody's wayward child too. Love on them, just like you'd like your child loved on by another Christian who welcomed your child into their home. Number 9, email them. Stay in touch. 10, take them to lunch. 11, take interest in their pursuits. And number 12, this harkens back to rule number 1 for your wayward child. Point them to Christ. No strategy, writes young Kuyper, for reaching your son or daughter will have any lasting effect if the underlying goal isn't to help them know Jesus. Painful? Yeah. Watching your prodigal ram their head against the wall, do themselves harm, end up in a bad place. Awfully painful. But Mom or Dad, those are the least of their and your worries. The big worry, the big concern, the state of their soul. So if you've got yourself a wayward or a prodigal, or your child is living at home and appears to be just sweet as cream, keep pointing them to Christ. This is Wretched Radio.
Would you please like, subscribe, or share this video so other people can enjoy this professional Christian content?